a record number of participants that have registered for this webinar of 1,000. And for those of you who are also joining us from the YouTube live stream, I welcome you as well. We had to open the YouTube live stream since we could not accept more participants on the webinar stream. So we have now 2 streams running in parallel. And that's a great sign of your interest into the ground handling regulations and ground handling safety in general. So before we start, let me just introduce who is sitting here in this room. I hope that you can all see us well and that you are in a place where you can also listen well and have good audio and internet connection. From our side, we are here with Tony Vandenberg from the Netherlands. Tony, maybe you want to quickly say hello.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Julia.
You are joining us from the CEA Netherlands. We are also here with Jonathan Heavey from the Irish Aviation Authority. Johnny.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you.
Nice seeing you as well. You're joining us from Ireland. And then here in EASA Cologne office on a lovely sunny day with a very blue sky outside, we have John Franklin from Communications. Then we have also Adina Söni, who is the ground handling expert at EASA, and Paul Tippe to my left-hand side, who's also a ground handling expert at EASA. My name is Julia Egerer, and I'm the section manager of the Aerodrome section. So before we spend these 2 hours together here for this ground handling implementation support webinar, let me just give you a quick introduction on how we want to interact with you and what you can expect from us today. First of all, we'll have some presentations, but we have made sure that we reserve 20 minutes at least to take your questions and to answer them. And so this should have some sort of element of interaction, even so you are a large number of people joining us. But we want to make sure that we make very good use of a tool that is quite good for interaction with large audiences. It's called Slido. And you can see here on the right-hand side of your screen when you join this webinar, a QR code. We invite you to make good use of this Slido. You can just use your phone, for example, or you can also join directly via the webinar. You already have the questions popping up. And if you like a certain question, it would be very good that you also like that question, because we expect a lot of questions and we will primarily address those questions that have the most likes. So we make sure that we touch upon the questions that are important for a majority of this large audience today. So that's it on some logistics. You can also follow us on YouTube. And again, the EASA YouTube channel, you will also find the Slido information there.
Sorry, it's the Together for Safety YouTube channel.
Okay, the YouTube channel is called Together for Safety. Thank you very much, John. And in that YouTube channel, you can also follow us in case some of your friends or colleagues were not able to register anymore because we have reached the top limit. All information on how to access the YouTube channel is available on the events page of the EASA website. So if you Google events, EASA, ground handling, implementation, you will immediately come to that page and find all the information.
Link to the page in the chat for everybody.
And my colleague John Franklin has also inserted the link to the page in the chat, so you can forward that to any colleagues who were not able to join via the webinar and who are joining us via the YouTube channel. And we will also upload this YouTube event or this webinar event on our EASA website. So for future references, you will find after this webinar on the EASA website, you will find the presentations. You will also find the recording of this first implementation support webinar. And we have other webinars in store. So please continue visiting this site and you will be able to follow our next events as well, in case there are still open questions. So let's start the interaction and let's work together for the next 2 hours, as I said, and also make sure that we have reserved enough time for your questions and answers. I would like to start by putting ground handling really as an important element of the big aviation safety world, or the aviation safety puzzle, as it says here, that we are all familiar with. You're probably joining us from any of those organizations. So we will have a question for you in Slido later, where you're actually joining us from. That gives us a good picture here, this slide, that ground handling was really the last missing piece in that big aviation safety puzzle, where we did not have safety regulations directly applicable to ground handling. So what we have had in the past, we've had ground handling safety mainly regulated via the Air Ops regulation for air operators. So here you basically see all the organizations that are currently within the remit of EASA. On the top left-hand corner, you have air operations. On the top right-hand corner, you have pilot training, followed by air traffic management, aerodromes. All of those things have actually already been for many, many years, for 20 years or 15 years at least, been regulated by the European Union under the so-called aviation safety framework. And ground handling is that last missing piece that we are now starting together with you to implement. And we understand it's a big challenge to be faced with a regulation, especially if you're coming from an environment like ground handling, which was not regulated at all before. And that's why we are here to help you and to accompany us on that new journey to integrate ground handling into the aviation safety framework. On the next slide, I just want to give you a quick overview of what we have had in mind for the last many, many years when we developed this regulation here from the EASA side, but we have actually worked with all the stakeholders in ground handling that are directly or indirectly impacted by this ground handling regulation. We have worked with member states, with airlines, with airports, and of course with you, the ground handling organizations themselves. So this focus that we have had in the ground handling regulation is really to integrate ground handling, as I said before, into the aviation safety framework. And we have based our regulation on the pillars that you see here. So what are they? On the top on this slide, you see safety culture, just culture. We understand that there is still a very low occurrence reporting culture in ground handling. And that's why this was really our guiding principle to establish the regulation by putting some rules around this concept of safety culture, just culture. Then going in a clockwise direction, the interfaces, super important because ground handling is operating at the aerodrome on behalf of the airlines. And so the interfaces between the aerodrome, the airline, and the ground handling organization, the ground handling service provider, is a crucial link to improve safety. If these actors understand what each one is doing, is exchanging safety information, that's where we can improve things at the local level the best. Then we also had, following again in a clockwise direction, the issue of level playing field, whereby we understand, and that's one of the principles of the aviation safety framework as well, not just safety, but also creating a level playing field for European actors in a single market, in a fully harmonized European aviation market, to have an understanding of what can I do, what can my competitor do. So level playing field is also an important element of this regulation. Finally, we touch upon something that we understand from our previous seminars and webinars raises a lot of questions. There will not be a certificate for ground handling, there will be a declaration regime. And we will explain that very clearly during this webinar as well, because we know that many people have questions around that. What is the declaration regime? how the organization declares itself vis-a-vis the, and that's the red dot here on the left-hand side, vis-a-vis the competent authority. So we have here two speakers, Johnny Heavy and Tony Vandenberg, joining us from a competent authority in Europe. Tony from Netherlands, Johnny from Ireland, but we have many more inspectors and people working in oversight of competent authorities. And now for the first time, we will integrate ground handling into the concept of oversight. So they will be directly overseen by competent authorities. And what we have also learned, a hugely important dimension in ground handling is training and continued competency of personnel. Especially ground handling, we have sometimes very large turnover rate of staff, especially after COVID, but also already before COVID. We know that turnover rates in ground handling are high, and training and continued competence is a real challenge for ground handling organizations. So we also built our regulation around this concept of training and continued competence. So just now taking you to the agenda of this webinar, what are we going to discuss together with you and exchange on? And that is the following. So what we will cover today is, does the regulation, the ground handling regulation 2025-20, does it apply to your organization? Yes or no? Then we will discuss what should ground handling organizations do to prepare themselves? Where should they start? What should they have in place? Then we will present again this topic of declaration. What is it? Who do I have to declare to? And how do I submit the declaration and when? So very basic questions that we have received from many of you via our inboxes and mailboxes. And that's why we steered that webinar. So we have now two polls before we go to the next slide, already to start you trying to test how this Slido works. So the first poll, which is open now, I think, will ask you, for which type of organizations do you work? So where are you joining us from in this wild world of ground handling and aviation? We would like to better understand where our audience is coming from. I give you a minute to find out where you're joining us from, whether you're joining us from a ground handling service provider, whether you work at the aerodrome or at an air operator. Maybe you're also joining us from one of the competent authorities, or none of the above. Could also be the case. You're just an interested person who would like to know about ground handling. So that's also fine. So
that's the input slide. So you're not on the results slide yet.
So
Yes.
I stopped sharing because I would like to check that the first question in the poll is opened.
So I can see the results.
So this is the moment, exactly. So please go to the Slido website and vote who you are, because we also want to know who we have in the audience so that we kind of get a picture about who is interested in these topics and how to address further your questions and where to put the focus. So thank you for answering the first poll.
Do you want me to put that on the screen?
I can do that.
No.
Yeah, sure.
And your votes will be anonymous also for all the other questions that will come in later. We will not be able to trace back the answers, who has provided the answers. So that's already good. We can see that 446 votes are coming in out of 654 participants that I can see here in the webinar. Maybe we also have more participants on the YouTube channel. Also, if you're joining us from the YouTube channel, you can access that slido.com, and the password is RAMP, R-A-M-P in capital letters. So that's great. 470 votes. I think one person is still typing. So a lot of people are joining us. This is really great. But we can already see, we are sharing that with you here. What is the result? That the majority of you joining us are coming from ground handling service providers. That's great. So we are really targeting the audience that we need to target, and you're joining us from ground handling service provider. We are very happy that we are able to have this very good outreach and interact directly with you, our primary audience, target audience, if I can call it like that. It's all new to many of you, probably also becoming part of this new EU regulatory system of aviation safety. We understand that you will have many questions. There's somebody saying his access to Slido is blocked.
But it's blocked by their IT.
It's probably your own IT. There's not much that we can do about. If you use your mobile phone, you can just scan that QR code that is on the website, or that you can also see in the webinar, and just use your mobile phone to access the Slido. So you can access Slido via your laptop, but also via your mobile phone. It's actually quite nice, so you have it on 2 devices. That's a good experience that I have had in the past working with Slido.
So we already have 541 votes. That's great, and going up.
Yeah, but the picture doesn't change. So the majority of you are actually joining us from ground handling service providers, followed by aerodrome operators. We know that ground handling is very important for you working at the aerodrome. That is great that you're joining us also. So many of you are joining us from aerodrome operators. We know that the interaction between aerodrome operators and ground handling service providers has its difficulties sometimes, because the customer-client relationship is mainly with the airline. So it's great to see that so many of you from the aerodrome community are also joining us. Then thirdly, we have organizations, air operators. That's fantastic, because we have been working very closely also with airline associations and airline representatives directly, who have, and we are still very grateful for the massive support of our stakeholders from airports, airlines, and ground handlers and member states. Yeah. Anything else you'd like to mention here about this poll, or can we continue?
No, it's important that we know already where we stand and who our audience is. So thank you very much. We would like to move to the next poll, because that's also relevant for us to understand how big, how large your organization is, because we also have foreseen some elements of alleviation for the small organization. So if that's okay with you, we already saw, we have already 592 votes. So if that's okay, we would move to the second poll. I think this will automatically close. You will not have access to it. So because we also want to keep things moving. So let's open the second poll, which is about the size of your organization.
How large is the organization you work for? We'd like to understand if you are coming from organizations with more than 500 employees. So here we do not want to know if you're coming from an airline, an airport, or ground handler, just how large the organization is that you're working for. More than 500, between 100 and 500, between 25 and 100 employees, or the small organizations as well, 1 to 25.
What I suggest, Julia, in order to gain some time, we can go back to this screen to show the audience the votes that we get, and in the meantime, we can progress with the discussion and with the topics.
Let's do that. I'll hand over to you now, to Adina, for the next slides that will give you a little bit of background information about the ground handling regulation. So thank you very much, and the floor is yours, Adina.
Great, Julia. So we'll get back to show you the close to final screen about the votes, about how large your organization is. And in the meantime, we will continue with the presentation of the topics for today. So we have intendedly put just a few topics in there for today, because we will have a series of webinars. We have 2 more webinars this year and more in the coming 2 years, and we don't want to repeat the same topic over and over again. We will, of course, get back to some interesting or controversial or complex topics, but with every webinar, we want to go deeper and deeper into the content of the regulations. So this is on me. I will share with you or remind you, or to the newcomers, let's say, I will introduce very, very briefly and very generically the regulations that were just published this March. So we have not too big, but two independent self-standing regulations addressing the new ground handling domain. One of them is Commission Implementing Regulation 2025/23, which contains the requirements for competent authorities to conduct the oversight. And the other regulation is actually addressed to the organizations providing ground handling services, and that is the Commission Delegated Regulation 2025/20. It contains two annexes. One annex contains the full management system, which is the umbrella concept for all the subsystems that are included in an organization's management. That includes the safety management system, which is probably one of the most important, one of the most crucial elements, subsystems in the management system of an organization. And we have a similar structure in all the other aviation domains that we regulate. And that's org MGM. This is the subpart, one of the subparts of Annex 1. Then we have the training of ground handling personnel. This is another subpart, org TRG. A third subpart is covering the documents and record system, as well as the declaration, and we will give you more details about the declaration regime later on. These are two subparts, org doc and org dec, and a separate subpart related to the ground support equipment and its maintenance. So that is org GSE. The second annex is made of high-level safety objectives addressing the operational requirements. So here in the second annex, operational requirements part GH Ops, we talk about, or with the regulation covers at a very high level, the operational requirements that you ground handling organizations are expected to apply to your operations. So these are the two big, let's say big again. I'm not saying big because they are actually not big compared to other regulations that we have, but they are self-standing ground handling regulations. Within this package that was published in March, we also have published amendments to three other regulations. One is affecting the Air Ops regulation, one is affecting the aerodromes regulation, and the third one is affecting Part IS, which is the information security management. A few details about the timelines now, because this is extremely important for you. And the first thing I would like to highlight is that you have 3 years to prepare for the implementation of the regulations. So they do not apply immediately. So we have published them in March. Next week, we will publish the EASA Acceptable Means of Compliance and Guidance Material, which you see on the screen as AMC and GM, and these come under EASA decisions, and they complement the regulatory package because they provide more information about how to implement the requirements. Those, again, will be published in June next week. And then you have 3 years to prepare for the implementation of the regulations, and the regulations will become applicable on the 27th of March, 2028, as well as the AMC and GMs published by EASA. We have given a longer period for the implementation of Part IS because this is a new animal in-house. We know already that it's extremely complex. So we want to be very smart and learn from the lessons in the other domains. And this is the reason why the applicability date of Part IS, which extends now to ground handling service providers, will be 2031. So we have 6 years for Part IS. This being said about the timelines, I will move on to the next topic, and this is the red thread that will accompany us to the end of this webinar. And I'd like to give the floor now to Tony. And I will also shift to the PDF because we want you to see better what we are talking about. Tony, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Alina. So what you see here, you all online, is the flowchart of the ground handling. From the Netherlands, we started developing this flowchart because we thought it was very helpful to see am I as a company in the scope or not. So From the beginning, we started with the MPA, working through, since we have this one now, which is the 2520, which you can see on the top in the yellow part. So if you use the flowchart, there are multiple we already published, so make sure you use this one. This is the latest version. And it all starts with the 2520, like Adina said. And then the first question for the company or an activity in the ground handling is the operation at an EASA aerodrome? Because it's only applicable for you if the operation takes place at an aerodrome where the basic regulation is also applicable. So speaking of national regulation or national aerodromes, it's not mandatory to have a declaration, but if you have multiple operations on a national or EASA certified aerodrome, then you have to file a declaration. So the first thing you want to check is the operation at an EASA aerodrome. Now we have two choices, no or yes. In this case, we go to yes. Then the regulation has three types defined: the ground handling service provider, the aerodrome, and an aircraft operator. You can see at the bottom, the article numbers are there. So we have 2.1 Alpha, 2.1 Bravo, and Charlie. You can find them in the regulation 20, and there you can see more about when you are a ground handling service provider, when you are an aerodrome, or when you are an aircraft operator. If we following the flowchart down, I don't know what's it. Okay, down. Yeah. Then the question is, what are the activities you are doing as an organization or an aerodrome or an aircraft operator? The activities will tell you if you have to declare, and this regulation applies for you. So then the main pillars we have are the passenger handling, baggage handling, aircraft servicing, turnaround activities, and the cargo and mail handling. As you can see again, underneath there are the article numbers, and we keep this very high level for now, but this flowchart will help you if you dig into the regulation. You can find out if you do passenger handling, what is passenger handling for this regulation? Baggage handling, what is baggage handling? 2.2 Bravo, you can see everything what's underneath baggage handling. Once you find out you are a ground handling service provider, an aerodrome, or an aircraft operator, you check your activities. If there's one or more activity, you are in the scope of this regulation, which means you go down further. Then you come to the exemptions. The exemptions are also, we keep it high level. There are some exemptions. As you can see, it's in 2.3, but it's too many to discuss, and it's very detailed to discuss them all. So we encourage to dig in this regulation, try to find out if you are in or not with an exemption, and you can follow the steps. So if you are an exemption, you go to the right, it's yes, and then finally you go to no declaration. If you are not an exemption and you do have one of the following activities above, you have to submit the declaration. So Johnny, I think you will go further into the exemptions now.
I think now what we discussed, to just let Johnny, give Johnny the release for flight, let's say, I would suggest that we break here for the exemptions. We can discuss the exemptions later and the next steps, because we think that what's important for you to know, and what Johnny will present in the next slides, is going to be what you should actually do to start implementing, to start preparing for the implementation of the regulation. So, Johnny, would you like me to share the screen, or do you like to do that? I think it's better.
You go ahead, Adina. I think.
Yes.
I think you have one more slide for yourself, though, possibly. But have a look.
That's okay. This is where you take over.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for being on here today with all of us. As this is the first webinar regarding this subject, we thought we'd really take it to the basic level of the simple question of where do I start? We need to keep in mind that this regulation is for all ground handlers that that need to comply with it, as Tony has just run through there. And that means we are looking at your large, extremely large multinationals, right down to what you could basically call your small mom and pop airlines at a regional, or mom and pop ground handler, should I say, at a regional airport. So a small number of staff, thus why the poll was put up. So unlike, we'll use airlines as an example, when they had to come under air ops, they were already coming from a strong regulatory structure, JAR ops, EU ops, whichever it was. And we're very aware that for the ground handling community, you're coming from nothing into a full regulatory scope. That can seem quite daunting, understandably so. So breaking it down into steps, what was it that Desmond Tutu said? How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? Really is the way to do this. So first and foremost, if you have not looked at the regulation yet, and I think a poll is probably going to appear fairly soon on that, if you've not looked at the regulation yet, please do. You can see a link here for the EASA website. And when you get onto that part of the link, the ground handling section, you will see a couple of options. They have been discussed already. Some of them there are the updates to air ops or aerodromes, but the bottom one there, 20 of 2025, is the one we all need to concern ourselves with, and that is the regulation that we will need to comply with. It's just, I think, about 39 pages before we get the AMCs to it, but it is worth getting that first and foremost. And if you've not looked at it, please start reading through it, start briefing yourself on it as step one. When we move then to step two, which I think should magically happen now, I would suggest a good way of doing it is pick one implementing rule. So that's one kind of headline requirement. Start going through it and start looking at what you have and start the gap analysis. So if we look here, we've put up here probably what I would say is the most important implementing rule, which is your requirements for the management system. So you take that and you take your safety management manual, whatever that may look like, whatever way that forms itself. It might be part of an overall GOM. It might be some documents at a small handler that they have, but start looking through each section and then start seeing what you have. I think to start with, nearly all of you would start looking at items within the regulation and seeing that you have it. You look there at B2, and then one, a description of the overall philosophy and principles of the organization with regards to safety, referred to as the safety policy. Now, pretty much everybody I've seen has a safety policy. You look to the next one, a process to identify safety hazards. You're going, okay, this is my risk assessment section. So you start looking, realizing that this is a lot of stuff we already have out there, and just do your gap analysis, see what you have, see how it looks, see do you need to add to it, and just document it in that way. Or if you need to start from scratch, you start from scratch. But you look, very important, look and see what you have. Moving to step 3. We'll get there. So as you are starting to look at each bite-sized bit of the regulation, we, the authorities, absolutely want to help. Tony will say the same there, and the other authorities on the call will say we absolutely want to help. So first and foremost, back onto the EASA website, and you'll see a section there which gives the contact details and websites for all the national authorities. Find your national authority, find the email address. It may be a generic one, that's fine. Email your competent authority if you don't already know who they are, and ask them who is the person responsible. The person responsible, I can guarantee you, at the authority wants to hear from you. We want to hear from you. We want you to make contact. We will also be trying to make contact. From there, you can start agreeing with your competent authority how and when to submit your declaration. Don't worry about that. We'll talk about the declaration soon. But the most important thing is we start that interaction because we want to help. We're having these large webinars. I'm sure locally in the States also competent authorities will be having their own meetings. In Ireland, we have a ground ops working group and we meet once or twice a year. We will certainly be meeting twice a year. And similar, I think, to the webinars here, we'll start picking you know, the main implementing rules, and we'll start devoting a couple of hours to go through them. But we can only do that once you've contacted us, so we know you exist effectively and that you fall under this regulation. So please help us with that and start that process now. And if we move to step 4, and probably if we're going to take anything out of my little piece here, the most important step is get to work. Do not sit on your hands. Do not go, oh, I've 3 years, that's fine. 3 years will be on us before we know it. Start the work now. The way to do that is your next safety meeting, make it an open agenda item. We said at the start there, pick an IOR and start working on your gap analysis for that IOR. Start that now. Pick one implementing rule for each meeting, even just to discuss that the work everybody's doing on it. Air operators and aerodromes that are listening in on this call and are part of this process, please assist your ground handling service provider partners. Yes, we'll have the big multinationals who've already got well-embedded management systems, but we'll have plenty who don't. And working together through your committee meetings, through your airport user committee, your airline operator committee meetings at the aerodromes, again, an open agenda item, checking that everybody has started the work and the work is going well, and using your skills where you've had an operating SMS or an operation training requirements for a long time, use those and help, you know, your partners, your ground handling service provider, contracted partners, to help them get over the line and understand how this works as well. So that would be, I think, the main steps we want to talk about, but we're going to move into one of the requirements we spoke about a moment ago. And that was using the management system regulation as a point of reference. We are going to be doing a webinar on this where we will get much more into the weeds of it, much more into the requirements, good ways to try and comply with this. But we just wanted to have a look at a few from that high level. Probably the most important part of that IOR is the first bit where it states the management system should be proportionate to the ground handling organization's size and complexity. You know, we speak about a large multinational, like I think Swissport, for example. I think worldwide, Swissport have something like 65, 66,000 staff. They dwarf virtually every airline in the world. They are a behemoth of an organization. So expecting some small regional ground handler at a small regional aerodrome to have the similar management system would obviously be absurd. It needs to be relevant to the size and, of course, the complexity. If you're handling one type of aircraft, your complexity is right down. If you're handling multiple different types of aircraft, your complexity grows. The SMS, the safety baseline for your ground handling services, and safety baseline being the key. You set your baseline and you strive for improvement at all times. You strive, you look to the next point there for that safety culture, to build that safety culture, that learning culture, that reporting culture, and of course, probably one of the most significant, the just culture. Building that just culture into your system to allow that safety culture to grow is an integral part. Just culture is not just about post-incident. It's about informing your colleagues of your key kind of safety issues that you're seeing there, getting the proactive into our operation. We can only do that through a working SMS, an effective SMS, and boosting that safety culture. Your ground support equipment will be in there. A key part of writing this regulation, obviously the mandatory maintenance program, but also making it technology agnostic. It is very important that regulation does not get in the way of new technologies, new improvements. We want to make sure they can be swiftly integrated into the system. Your training program, of course, you all will have a training program. This comes back to your gap analysis. Go to the IOR and look and see, making sure you comply with the different areas. So we can have that training program for the personal competence, of course, the ongoing competence, that competence approach we've seen in dangerous goods now for a couple of years. A document system, of course, and then your integrated management system. We want to see that if you're an aerodrome that self-handles, if you're an airline that self-handles. We obviously don't want you to have a siloed management system. For the ground handling arm of your business, we want that integrated. We want to see them working together and gaining all that superb knowledge we can have that can help make this whole process a success. Adina?
Thank you, Johnny, very much. So as Johnny said before, we are going to discuss this much into depth in one of our next webinars. But for now, we let you the pleasure of reading the material yourselves to get yourselves familiar with the regulation and start asking questions. Perhaps that's the most important thing that you will do when you start reading the rules is asking questions. And if you don't know how to answer those questions, that's why we encourage you to contact your competent authorities to get support and assistance. Aside from the discussions that we had, this is not part of the topic, but I think it's important for you to know is the fact that EASA and all the European states or the EASA states competent authorities are working together. We have regular meetings at least once a month where we discuss all the potential implementation issues. We also put together the system for doing a good and an effective and efficient oversight. So that is aside from what you, the ground handling industry, are doing to prepare yourselves for the implementation of the regulations. In a similar way, we are doing lots of activities and actions with the competent authorities together so that we, at the end, when the date of application comes in, we are ready to start. Thank you very much, Johnny. I will now take over, and if you remember the flowchart that Tony has presented to you earlier, we are now going to discuss the bottom half, let's say, starting from the exemptions. I will say a few words about what exemptions are included in the regulation, but I will also not reveal everything, just to give you the chance to look at Article 2.3 of Regulation 25/20. Then we move on to the declaration, what the declaration is, what the declaration regime actually means compared to what many of you in the industry are used to, for example, a certification regime, air operators and aerodrome operators. We will also give you more clarifications about what is understood by what you see there as the PPOB. What is a PPOB? PPOB is the principal place of business for a ground handling organization. So we'll give you more details about that. And last but not least, to which competent authority you should submit your declaration. So about the exemptions, I wanted to say a few things, and I also created a slide about something else. But both elements are actually included in this Article 2.3 containing the exemptions. So to which organizations is the ground handling regulation applicable? When it comes to self-handling aircraft operators, that is the aircraft operators that do self-handling to their own aircraft and passengers and cargo. In the scope of the regulation, we only have aircraft operators of aeroplanes, but not any type of aeroplanes, complex motor-powered airplanes, when they perform commercial air transport operations. So only this category of aircraft operators doing self-handling is included in the ground handling regulation scope. So CAT operators of complex motor-powered airplanes performing CAT operations, again, I'm repeating myself, I apologize for that. And what's outside of scope is everything else. So, for example, if you are a CAT operator, so a commercial air transport operator, using non-complex airplanes, you are out of the scope because Regulation 965 air operations covers the safety risks well enough. So there's no need to duplicate that by imposing compliance with another regulation. If you are a business operator, meaning in the European system, this means an NCC, a non-commercial operator performing non-commercial operations with complex motor-powered airplanes or aircraft, you are not in the scope if you do self-handling. You are also not in the scope if you are a specialized operator, yes, an SPO. You're also not in the scope if you perform flights with sailplanes, balloons, helicopters, or any other flying machine. These types of aircraft are, for the time being, not included in the scope of the ground handling regulation. We will reevaluate the efficiency and the proportionality of the rules in a few years' time to see whether it makes sense to extend the scope. But for now, these types of aircraft, everything that is not a complex motor-powered airplane for self-handling, I'm repeating again, is not included in the scope. I will give you another hint about what exemptions we include in the scope, are included in the scope of the what exemptions there are in Article 2.3. Aircraft marshalling. We don't cover, the ground handling regulation does not cover aircraft marshalling because this is included already in the aerodrome regulation 139 from 2014. Another example is flight dispatch. Flight dispatch is a typical operation linked to the operational control of an aircraft operator. So it's not ground handling, it's flight ops. That's also included in the Air Ops regulation. Ground supervision. This is a service that is most of the time, all the time, under the full control of the aircraft operator. Therefore, ground supervision remains under the control of the aircraft operators under Regulation 965. Oil handling, that is definitely not a ground handling activity. This is a maintenance task. Oil handling is included and is covered by the Continuing Airworthiness Regulation 1321 from 2014. Any other ground handling activity or task that is performed by a maintenance organization for aircraft maintenance purposes, for example, aircraft towing, or aircraft exterior cleaning, when these activities are performed by a maintenance organization that is certified either in accordance with Regulation 1321 or in accordance with ICAO Annex 8, are not included in the scope of this regulation. And there are other exemptions. Please go to Article 2.3 to read about them.
Can I intervene here quickly on a logistical point? I am seeing that many of you are using the chat for your questions. May I remind you that the best way to interact with us, and actually the only way, is to use the Slido. So if you go to slido.com and you type in the password RAMP, you will see all the questions that your colleagues have posted already. We have now closed the poll, so you can see the question again better. And I realize while we have 670 participants, the top question only got 25 votes. So it would be a good thing right now if you, I know it's a lot to take in at the same time, but while you're listening to us, also think about questions that are important to you, but also go to the questions that are already there to make sure that we will address the ones that have the largest number of votes and likes, and that we can really address those questions that are the most important to those 670 participants here. It's a little bit challenging to work with such a large audience, but the Slido tool really allows you to make sure that you tell us what we should prioritize in the Slido and in this webinar, and to make sure that we can address your concerns the best. So this was just an intervention because I realized we had, again, a lot of questions come and really good questions, I must say, coming in on the chat. Also, some people have sent me some private chat messages. We cannot address them, unfortunately. If you use the Slido, your questions are anonymous. We will not be able to find out who is behind the question. That's a great way for us and for you to also let us know where you have some difficulties in terms of understanding.
Absolutely. And I think the reason why Julia is insisting on you using the Slido is also because your questions and the focus that you put in your questions are important for us to understand what you're afraid of, where your problems are, what's difficult to understand. And we also plan, as part of the support to you in the implementation of the regulations is to create as much as possible a comprehensive list of frequently asked questions, which we will publish on the EASA website in the coming months. And all the feedback that we get from your questions, we will address in this list of FAQs that you will always be able then to check, to go back to it once we publish it. So thank you very much already in advance for asking your questions in Slido. So now moving on to the next boxes in our red thread flowchart, which I display quickly again before I give the floor to Paul, is we are going to talk about the declarations and the principal place of business of a ground handling organization. So going back to the presentation, and the floor is Paul's.
It's mine. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're still with us. A lot of information, but it's good that you can read it back and see the YouTube later on. In the next few minutes, I will briefly tell you something about the declaration, the principal place of business, and also how to submit the declarations to the relevant authorities. As you've already learned, there's no approval or certification required. I think that's the good news. Just submitting a declaration will do. Do this when your organization feels comfortable, feels ready for it. Only then, because to submit a declaration, you declare that your organization is compliant with the ground handling regulation. That's the first thing you do. If you submit a declaration, you must be ready for it. And the good thing about that is that from that moment on, the operation can start immediately. Or if you're an existing ground handling organization, you could continue your ground handling activities. It's that simple. But it's also really important to realize that the responsibility for the compliance with the regulation is first with the ground handling organization, because you have declared that the organization is compliant with, etc. And after a certain time, compliance will be checked through the oversight by the competent authorities. That's more or less the most important things about the declaration. It's not difficult. It's not. It's easy to do.
Can I ask you something, Paul?
Sure.
What is actually a declaration? What does it look like? Do you think it would be useful for the audience to know at this moment, or
maybe
we can come back later on?
We can show an example of the declaration.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
So
it's in the regulation.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Commission delegated regulation, the one that I'm showing now on the display, which can be found at the link indicated by Johnny earlier. But just in case, if you type in Google regulation 2025-20, you will get to this page. So here is the declaration. It's a form, actually. It's a form that contains fields with different categories of information.
Yeah.
Tell me when to scroll up down.
Yeah, you can scroll down, of course. The name of the organization, you can fill in there, the principal place of business, which I will explain a little bit later, more or less. The provision of the ground handling services you provide, self-handling or to third parties. That's the organizational part you will have to fill in. Well, it almost speaks for itself. If you go down.
Yes.
This is the part. An EU aerodrome at which the organization provides services in full name and ICAO code. Here you fill in what aerodrome you are providing your services. In every state, every EU member state, you have to put it in there.
Yeah.
Then
there are the statements.
Then there are the statements. You just fill in. You have to check if you're compliant with it, if everything can be ticked.
So this is a generic entry. The people coming from the air ops domain may already be familiar with this model, with this form of a declaration, that we also have that for NCC operators and SPA operators. This is a list of statements actually that when you tick the box, you actually assume you assume full responsibility and accountability that whatever you tick there in that box you comply with. So these are the regulations or parts of the ground handling regulation that you're required to comply with. Or, for example, the basic regulation. This is the one, well, we call it the basic regulation. That's 2018-1139, which is our constitution, let's say. But there's also another second constitution that we have in the aviation world, which is Regulation 376 on 2014, related to the occurrence reporting. So this is a generic part of the declaration containing various statements that will also have to be filled in, or you will have to tick the box before you submit the declaration, practically confirming that you comply with the regulations applicable to you.
And if you scroll,
there's also a part about the industry standards. So if your organization already uses industry standards and good practices, you can add the list here. When we publish the EASA, AMC, and GM, we will also have a list of industry standards and good practices that we refer to at the guidance material level.
Yeah, that will help you a lot. The AMC
Yes.
and the guidance material will help you a lot also with filling in the declaration and understanding what's being published there.
Maybe an element here I would like to highlight. We have already received questions in the past asking us if there will be a list of ground handling organizations in Europe available, published somewhere. And that would be wonderful because that will let every aircraft operator conducting operations in Europe to which ground handling service providers they can go because they are already declared and compliant with the ground handling regulation. So we have added a specific to this declaration form contains a specific field, this one, in which actually the ground handling organization has to give their consent if their contact details may be published on the website. It's either going to be on the EASA website or on the website of the competent authority in the country where the ground handling organization provides services. So I think this is important for you because this gives you visibility, your name and contact details, an email address will be added in this list so that you can be contacted by aircraft operators in Europe. Then the second part
The
of the
second part,
declaration.
the annex to the declaration. As it says here, to be filled individually, then it's not readable anymore.
Sorry about
Individually for each aerodrome where the organization provides ground handling service under its declaration. So if you're an organization which has a principal place of business somewhere in Europe and you provide services in other states, you have to put it in. You put in here all the aerodromes where you provide handling service, ground handling services.
So actually, Paul, this annex will have to be filled in for every aerodrome, right?
Yes, in one time.
Yes.
It's just one form. You declare only once. The declaration is only one declaration. It's a declaration with the generic part in the top, and this part
is only once, and then this annex goes for every aerodrome.
For every aerodrome you put in, and if there is a change, you will provide services at a new aerodrome or somewhere else. You just have to amend it and send it in again. But this is what you have to do for every aerodrome.
And then the list of activities, the list of services.
Yeah, it's like you saw also in the flowchart Tony had presented. Exactly. Passenger handling and baggage handling, aircraft servicing, turnaround activities. It's all the items which are also in the flowchart.
Yeah. And that's it. That's the
Yeah,
declaration.
that's the declaration. That will be it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that has been quite useful. So,
Absolutely.
back to the presentation.
Back to the presentation. The responsibility. The responsibility for compliance with the regulation is first with the ground handling organization, and that's what I said earlier. Then the competent authority will do the oversight after that. It will be in a couple of years, maybe. What we strongly advise or even recommend to the existing ground handling organizations is to submit the declaration anytime between 27th of March 27 and the next year, 27th of March 28, is actually the date of applicability of the ground handling regulation. So please use this last year of the 3-year transition period to get some assistance from your competent authority. They are eager to help you, I'm sure. It benefits your organization before the regulation will be applicable. And thus, during that period, there will be no formal findings, but you may receive constructive assistance, compliance assistance with the regulation implementing. Unfortunately, there's an error in Article 5 of the regulation, the transitional provisions. This will be corrected from 27th of March 24 to 27th of March 28, of course. And now there's another small poll for you.
Let's just open the poll.
There it is.
So yes, that's an important question for us to understand whether your organization is local, provides services only to an aerodrome or within the member state, or goes beyond the borders and provides services in more than one member state. Or, as it may be the case for Germany, there's a ground handling organization that provides services in more than one Bundesland, which also means that you have more than one competent authority. And why this is important, we will explain in the coming slides.
Yeah.
Somebody asked in the chat if we are going to publish the results of the poll.
Yes, that's interesting.
That's
Yeah, why
possible.
not?
We
can,
will
yes.
also upload the results of the poll on the EASA website. So
No secrets.
Yeah.
No, it's a good idea.
that will be a takeaway also for us from this webinar and for you.
So this is a very interesting result. So more than 0.51. So that's 51% of the audience we have provide services only in a member state. So we will already make more than half of the audience happy with a simple explanation. What happens if you only operate in a state?
Yeah.
Okay.
Makes it much easier.
So while we keep this poll open, I will move back to the presentation because what follows is a bunch of very, very important information and it could be quite tricky. So,
yeah. Yes, it's about the principal place of business. I know that for some of you this is something new. Some of them recognize it maybe. This is what the regulation tells us about the PBOB, principal place of business. The principal place of business is, well, you can read it here, the place where corporate financial functions are exercised. But also the place where the accountable manager exercises their role and the effective and actual center of the control, from where the business development and continuity and the strategy and planning activities are managed on a regular basis. Actually, that's the place where the big decisions were made. So try to find out as your organization where your principal place of business is. Mostly it's the headquarter. So
yeah, we also use this term to identify an organization's principal place of business. It's where its headquarters are. It's where usually the biggest, most important decisions affecting the organization as a whole, as a unity, are being taken. For example, where the accountable manager takes the most important decisions, or whether, for example, and here I refer to a large organization operating globally, a decision is being taken on whether to provide services in a new country, or whether to retreat or to close business in a country in which that organization already provides services. So these big decisions are always linked to an organization's principal place of business.
It can be quite difficult to understand fully, but I only highlighted a little bit. It's not that important from this moment, but it's important, especially for organizations providing ground handling service in more than one member state, so less than half of the audience. There's a poll. We have another poll.
Yes. And that is the test question for you.
It's difficult.
Do you know in which country your principal place of business is? You may not know, or you may have it wrongly. It doesn't mean that you will fail if you don't know the answer to this question. But you will have to think about it at a certain point. So if you can go back to Slido and let us know if the number 5 question, do you know in which country your PPOB is open? I see it already open, but I'm not sure that it works. It should be working properly. Says voting.
Yes,
closed.
it is working.
Okay, so why does it say here voting closed?
Okay, then you need to open. Yeah, that is indeed, you need to open it again. It
All
was
right,
closed
so
accidentally.
now you should be able to access it.
Sorry.
That's the technology.
Oh, that's good news. We have already many answers saying, yes, we know where our principal place of business is. That's very good.
But I also looked at the questions that we have received via Slido. There are many questions on principal place of business.
Well,
So
we'll have a look and answer.
please also, if you still are amongst those that have concerns about principal place of business, use the Slido to upvote those questions that have principal place of business in them. I saw a couple of them in the question side of the Slido, in the Q&A side. So if you upvote those questions, then we will definitely prioritize those once we get to the Q&A part of this webinar.
And I'm sure in one of the coming webinars, we will getting more detailed into the principal place of business if there are so many questions about it, if it's not really clear.
Yes, and what I would suggest is maybe, because we have a couple of ideas about our next webinars, not just for this year, but also for the coming years, is to involve at least one, if not more, of the ground handling organizations out there who have provided tremendous support to us in the past few years when drafting the regulation, and actually come up with concrete examples on how one can determine their principal place of business. And then we will give the opportunity for the organizations that have already gone through this exercise to share from their experience. So while we keep this poll open,
We can go to the next slide.
I will revert back to the presentation and.
Yeah. Well, here's when you have one competent authority. So if you're an organization who is operating in one country, one member state, and you have one competent authority, the ground handling organization has to submit the declaration through a so-called digital platform. That's the cloud and the computer in the slide. Just by one click, it's easy. When you prepared the declaration, it's all finished, all filled in. You submit it to the digital platform by one click. I will not go too much details about it, but it's only applicable from March 2027. Option 1, this one. When you have one competent authority, so operation in one EASA state, you only have to submit declaration to the competent authority where the principal place of business is, so where your headquarters is. That's the easiest option, this one. And the next option, number 2, is when you have more than one competent authority. If you have the declaration shall be submitted to the competent authority of the state where the PBOB is, where the principal place of business is, as well as the competent authorities of the other states of operation. Remember, this can just be done by one click. So you fill in one form, like we showed you before, and by one click you can upload it and submit it to that digital platform. From there, it will automatically be available for all relevant competent authorities. So there's nothing for you to do extra. And then we got one special case. When you have more than one competent authority, but your PBOB, your principal place of business, is not in a EASA state, so it's outside, for example, the Middle East or somewhere else. It's not an EASA member state. What you have to do then as an organization, you have to submit the declaration to all the competent authorities in all EASA states where you operate. So it's also done by one click still, but to all, you have to select all the states where you operate, the full package.
Shall I move?
Yeah, I hope I made it clear.
So we can, of course, we can go back to the discussion about the principal place of business and to which competent authority you should submit your declaration. We'll have a look at the questions. I think we will have enough time to answer the questions. But before we get to the Q&A session, where you will have the floor, or you will have the written floor, let's say, because you can't, you will probably not be able to speak in the webinar. I think what we had in mind with this slide, we wanted to anticipate some of the questions that some of you already may have in your mind, those of you who are familiar with the Ground Handling Directive, because we know we receive similar questions, we received questions in the past about how is the ground handling regulation different from the ground handling directive? What's one, what's the other? And then we thought about this is the right time to provide a clarification about the scope and what each of the two regulations or directive in the other case is about. So it's important for you to distinguish between the two, especially when it comes to the scope of each of the two. This new regulation that we have now, Regulation 2025/20, is a regulation that is only concerned with safety aspects. So all the safety aspects related to the provision of ground handling services are covered by Regulation 2025/20. The Ground Handling Directive, on the other hand, is not concerned with safety. It had a different purpose at the time, at the prehistorical times when it was written, and that was in 1996. And this Ground Handling Directive, it has its name is 9667 EC. The purpose of that Ground Handling Directive was to regulate market access. So it only covers the economic or the market aspect, which is the access of ground handling service providers at the aerodromes in the European Union. It has nothing to do with safety. So the scope of the two regulatory acts is different. And the Ground Handling Regulation 2025/20 has nothing to do with the Ground Handling Directive, nor the directive with the new EU regulation. There's another important aspect that I will not insist too much on that because this is very legalistic talk and it's not our purpose to go in there, is the fact that an EU Commission regulation applies directly to all the EASA states, to all the EU member states, plus the other 3 member states that we have in the EASA, in the EASA scope, that is Switzerland, Norway, and Iceland. Liechtenstein does not have an airport, that's why I don't mention Liechtenstein. So this regulation is directly applicable to all these states. This means that there is no need for every country to have a national legislation to copy-paste the content of the EU regulation. By comparison, the Ground Handling Directive has to be transposed into the national legislation of each member state in order to be implemented. This may lead to not a perfect harmonization because there may be variations, although this is not ideal, and these variations, while little, may still introduce some misalignments between the different ways in which this directive is implemented in every member state. So again, I'm not going to insist on that. It's important for you to understand that and to remember that the ground handling regulation is addressing only the safety aspects. And maybe that's another important aspect that an occasion for me to highlight the fact that for the ground handling services included in the scope, the regulation and the competent authorities in doing the oversight on how you implement or how you comply with the regulation, they will not be concerned with any other aspect. So they will not be concerned with the punctuality, with the level of services, with the quality aspect, any such things, only with the safety aspects of the ground handling services that you provide. This being said, we are reaching the time of questions and answers, but not before asking you to answer another poll, which I'm going to open soon. And then I will insist a little bit on the differences between what exists today and what will be tomorrow when the ground handling regulations will apply. And by tomorrow, I don't mean literally tomorrow, but I mean in 3 years' time. So here is a last poll for you. We want to hear you. We want to listen to your proposals and suggestions for topics for the next webinars. As I mentioned before, we already have a few ideas, but we would like to hear from you. What is your biggest concern? What you would like to hear more being discussed here? We will also involve more people in this speaking panel, in the panelists. Among the panelists, we will also involve members of the ground handling industry to join us here, depending on the topic, of course. So we see here important the role and responsibility of aerodromes, cooperative oversight. That is a very important aspect. We plan to dedicate one full webinar on the oversight and the cooperative oversight. Integrated management system, integration of business aviation, ground handling training.
And remember, when the AMC and guidance material is published, I think you will find a lot of answers on those questions, but still, this is important.
Yes, absolutely. So it was not ideal. We had planned differently. We had hoped that the AMC and GM would be published by today, but we're still not way behind. So we will have them in a week.
In 1 week, the AMC GM will be published. I already answered that in the Slido as well. You're very active. That's great that we get so much input from you on what you would like to focus on during the next implementation support webinars. And there will be several more. We have 3 years to work with all of you. And we are here to assist you, like you have said. This is really implementation assistance.
It's also going to be very important to highlight or to explain how the industry standards have a place and how we intend to accommodate them in the regulation. And the industry standards and the existence of good industry standards and good practices in the ground handling industry is the reason why the second annex of the ground handling regulation is so small. We didn't want to put a lot of material, a lot of content there, because we didn't want the regulation to tell you how to do your job, because you are the real experts. We only wanted this annex 2, GH Ops, to list the high level safety objectives that your operation will have to achieve so that you can implement whatever you are implementing today, be it your own SOPs, your own special operating procedures, or the industry standards and the good standards. So this is where you fill in the granularity, the level of details of your operational procedures, where the regulation remains high level. And this is probably the first time that we are addressing the industry standards through a regulation this way, because this is not a new domain. It's an old domain, it's just newly regulated. So we had to come up with a smart solution for that. That's an interesting list we're going to have to look at. I think we have plenty to study. The poll remains open. And I thought it was important for you to understand what the differences between today and tomorrow are. So this is a summary. What will change? What this new ground handling regulation brings is the full and formal, legal now, accountability and responsibility of the ground handling organizations for the safe provision of the ground handling services. This means that the ground handling organizations from now on, from 2028 on, will be fully accountable and responsible that they provide safe services to your passengers, your aircraft, your cargo, baggage, and mail. How this is going to be done? Through the implementation of a management system. Again, this is the umbrella concept that covers the SMS, the safety management system, the training of your personnel and their continued competence, the proper maintenance of your ground support equipment, your compliance monitoring process, and your documentation system and record system. What is also new is the declaration regime. We know already that in some member states, ground handling organizations are subject to a more stricter regime today. Some member states apply a certification regime. In the future, when the regulation becomes applicable, there will be no more certification, meaning there is no prior approval by the competent authority of the ground handling organizations or the services that they provide. This is going to be a declaration regime, meaning that the focus of main responsibility will shift from the competent authority who controls to the ground handling organization who implements. Of course, the monitoring, the oversight will be there, but not in the first period in which you are expected to take full responsibility for compliance with the regulation. So the declaration regime will be totally new. And what's also going to be new for many of the member states today, that we have today, is the direct oversight by the competent authorities to the ground handling service providers. This control is today being done in some member states by the competent authorities, but in most of the member states by the aircraft operators or by the aerodrome operators, depending on how the ground handling directive is being transposed in the national legislations of the member states. So in the future, we will have a harmonized approach, because we will have one regulation for 30 member states, not 30 different regulations or no regulation at all. So this oversight will be a direct oversight focusing and addressing directly, with no intermediaries, the ground handling service providers. What does not change? The aircraft operator remains responsible for the safety of the aircraft, and that will never change. The aircraft operator also remains responsible for the safe provision or for the safety of ground handling operations when they fly outside the EASA states. So in third countries, aircraft operators continue to remain responsible that the ground handling services are safe, are provided in a safe way. So if you fly in the USA, if you fly in any of the countries in the Americas, if you fly in Asia, if you fly in Australia, in Africa, you will, as aircraft operators, will continue to remain responsible for the safe provision of ground handling services. What also does not change is the fact that the ground handling organizations will have to comply with the instructions and the procedures received from the aircraft operators. This is a given, and there's no way around, and this is no compromise, and it's a no-go, because this is already embedded in the regulation that goes above this ground handling regulation, which is our basic regulation. That is, if you remember, the regulation 2018/1139. That is an essential requirement, very clearly stating that the ground handling organization shall apply the instructions and the procedures of the aircraft operator. What also does not change is the fact that the ground handling organization has to comply with the instructions or with the procedures of the aerodrome operator, which are applicable to it. That's another essential requirement also included in the basic regulation, which happens today. Actually, this is nothing new. So ground handling organizations will continue to comply with these two big requirements, one coming from the aerodrome domain, the other one coming from the air operations, meaning aircraft operators area, which is a perfect demonstration of the fact that ground handling is a perfect interface between the two. And that's what makes our business more complicated, because we have to listen to all these sides, both the aircraft and the aerodrome operators. What we would be really happy if you take away from this webinar are 4 main points, besides the other things that we all talked about. So how you should get yourself prepared. First of all, it would be great if you are aware that we are aware that some of you might be scared, and that's why we are here. And that's why also the competent authorities will be there to support you. It's probably no different from what you do today, but the fact that there is going to be a regulation that you will have to comply with, that there will be somebody from a competent authority to oversee you, might seem a bit scary for some of you, and that's fully normal. I think it's understandable. So we will provide all the support that we can provide to you via these webinars, via guidelines that will be published on the EASA website, the FAQ as comprehensive as possible, and also by providing you the contacts for your competent authorities and also the contact for EASA in case you have any questions.
That's why it's also so important, like Johnny said in the beginning, get in contact with your competent authority as soon as possible. Try to collaborate with them.
Exactly. So your first step is to go to the website, read the regulations. Not both are applicable to you. One, as an industry, the most important for you, for the industry, is 2025/20. But you will definitely want to have a look at 2025/23, which is the regulation for competent authorities, because you will definitely be interested to know how this oversight is going to be performed, what a finding means, what a level 1 finding means versus what a level 2 finding means, and how the cooperative oversight is expected to happen. So this is what you can find in the second regulation that is displayed on this first panel, let's say. I'm going to use the laser pointer here. So here, the second step would be to do a gap analysis, as Johnny showed to you before. Take your manuals and your documentation system, all the manuals that you have, compare them to the content of the regulation, of Regulation 2025/20, and see what is missing, what is different, if you need to add anything. This is how the gap analysis should take place. And you have 3 years available to do that. Rule by rule, you will have also the AMC and GM to guide you through your compliance, of course. Step number 3 is contact your competent authority. Make yourselves known to them. Just get in contact with them. You know who to contact, who to go to if you have a question. That's a very important aspect. And the 4th step, which is going to happen only in 2027, is the time when you have to submit a declaration. And take advantage of this 1 full year before the regulations become applicable, because this is still a playground. This is still a testing period for you. You will not be, how shall I say, you will not receive any findings. So there's still a chance for you to talk to your authority, ask, am I doing right what I'm doing? Am I missing something? Can you please explain to me once more, what am I expected to do under this rule or the other rule? So that is your chance. Use it this year, in which you are supposed to submit a declaration, but nothing happens yet.
And I'm sure that the competent authorities will really appreciate it, because they have to learn also. They're
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's also important.
Absolutely. So with this final slide, this is just there for you to know when our next webinar is going to take place. I will stop sharing now because we want to have a look at the questions.
Yes, and while you were talking, I have had already a look at the questions. I've already answered some of the questions.
Excellent. Thank
Took
you
the
very
liberty
much.
of my possibility to make good use of the time, so I answered some of them. And I propose the following, because I screened all the questions. We have 103 questions, so that we address the top 6 questions that have been voted with the most likes. So we really address the like question. And then there is a nice function in Slido where you can then see also what is the majority of the questions about. So actually the majority of the questions is about the declaration. And that was one of our focus areas. So then we can do a little bit of a deep dive into the declaration questions. That would be my proposal. So we are really efficient in the remaining 30 minutes. Is that acceptable?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we go and answer the top questions, which the first one I have already answered, which is about the AMC GM. When is it going to be published? So if we go back to Q&A, I think that should.
Sorry.
Yeah. So the question was whether we are going to publish when we are going to publish the GM and AMC, and if EASA will publish an easy access document. So Sam, thank you very much for your question. We will publish the AMC GM in a week's time, and we will of course also then make available the easy access rules. Do we have a timeline for that?
No, we don't have a timeline because we wanted to see that the AMC and GMs are first approved and published, and then we will be taken into the process of creation of the easy access rules. We don't have a timeline for that. It will definitely be this year. We hope this will be happening quite soon.
Okay, so we have answered that. And we understand that the easy access rules are very important. The next question is, to what extent will air operators be held responsible for non-compliance by third-party ground handling providers under the new rules? So it's about shifting of responsibilities that we had in the last slide. Who would like to answer that question?
I can answer that question. Diego, thank you for this question. I think it's a very important one, and we had to deal with similar questions also in the past. What's important for you, for everybody, is to understand that in this case, responsibility being assigned to one organization or the other is not a carte blanche. We can never say from the beginning who is responsible of a certain event that occurred. Why? Because an investigation needs to take place, and depending on what went wrong, after finding the root causes of an event, can then the responsibility be attributed to one organization or the other. So that's why we cannot say black on white, it's going to be the aircraft operator responsible if there is a damage to the aircraft, or it's going to be the responsibility of the ground handling service provider if damage happens to the aircraft. Why? We need to go deeper. So we have to ask ourselves several whys in order to understand what happened and to determine whose responsibility it is in a case of an event. So in a case of an event like, I don't know, the high loader or the baggage belt hits the aircraft and produces damage to the aircraft fuselage, who is responsible for that? We need to have a look at every single aspect of this process or of that ground handling activity. What is the condition of the equipment that has been used? Has it been maintained properly in accordance with the maintenance program or not? We also have to have a look at the training of the ground handling person that operates that piece of equipment, or the person that loads the baggage. Has this person been properly trained or not? Have they followed all the training programs and training courses that they have to undergo? Has the recurrent training been up to date and provided in proper time, or an update training, or whatever type of training that person needs to go to undergo? Have all the trainings been done? Then we have to have a look at another aspect, which is the operational procedures. Has the procedure as regarding how the vehicle or the equipment has to approach the aircraft or has to be removed from the aircraft been followed as written? And whose procedure was that? Was it the aircraft operator procedure, or was it the ground handling organization procedure? It depends on how the aircraft operator and the ground handling organization agree between themselves on what set of operational procedures to follow. And then if the procedure is wrong, or if there is a problem with that procedure, let's say, or has the no-touch policy been implemented? So all these, we can say minute aspects, even though they are not minute, even all these aspects of the service of the operation proper, which resulted in some damage to the aircraft, have to be taken into account before establishing who bears the responsibility for that particular damage. So it's quite a difficult, I think this is probably one of the most complex issues we have to deal with, but it's not a black and white answer.
And maybe if we turn it around, Diego, to answer your question, sometimes it also helps to look at it from the other extreme. So the fact that we now have a regulation for ground handling organizations for the first time to regulate the safety of ground handling does not exonerate the airline from also, of course, having some sort of responsibility to make sure that the service that they are being provided for is provided as agreed and as expected by the airline. So it does not exonerate the airline, because this is the system we are living in, we are working in. Aviation safety, you cannot shift all responsibility and accountability to one single player. It is a concept of working together. That's why we had in the beginning this slide on interfaces. It's the interface between the airline, the ground handler, and the airport in this context. Before, we had nothing on ground handling safety in the European Aviation Safety Framework. So, of course, all the responsibility was with the airline and the aerodrome as well, because the aerodrome also had to take that into account. Now we have regulated ground handling safety. It will require those three parties to work together to ensure that safety overall is improved. So I think we can put that question as answered. And then we have a next question from Henrik Amber. It's about ground handling staff having to work on different aircraft types by air operators, and each air operator having its own version of procedures for the same aircraft type. A freighter handler last year said that they are given 11 ways to cone and chock a B747 freighter. Will this regulation help to standardize these procedures? That's a question from Hendrik.
It's a very good
answer?
question. Hendrik, thank you for this question. It's a very important one. And the answer that I'm going to give you is make some people or make you half happy, let's say, but we're not there yet. We're not all the way through. Why? Because we said from the beginning, we don't want the ground handling regulation to create a parallel path to the existing industry standards. And we don't want the ground handling regulation to contain details about how a certain service has to be done. And that's the unhappy part to the answer, because we do not provide a set of operational procedures in the regulation. Why? It's intentional, because we will never be able to keep up with the updates that the industry is going through, with the continuous feedback that the industry receives every year. We will never be able to update the regulations on the same quick pace as the industry standards and the SOPs, special operating procedures, are being updated every year. We will never be able to do that. Secondly, it's because we know that there are good industry standards and good practices and SOPs out there that the organizations already apply. So we don't want to replicate or to copy or to multiply the sets of, because we will get to a chaos in which there won't be just 11 ways to count and chalk a B747, but there will be 100. So we don't want to get there. However, we know that this is a big issue, and while we cannot solve it completely, this still remains to be solved and agreed upon between the aircraft operator and the ground handling service provider. What we could do through the regulation was to provide, let's say, to put a hook in the rules for aircraft operators and ground handling service providers to use that hook in order to agree on the same set of operational procedures. So while the basic regulation and this ground handling regulation both say the ground handling service provider shall follow the instructions and the procedures of the aircraft operator, this ground handling regulation also says that the ground handling service provider and the aircraft operator may agree, meaning the aircraft operator may agree to use the same set of operational procedures of the ground handling organization, particularly when they are based on the same industry standards. Mm-hmm. So that is expected to reduce the number of variations of the ways in which a B747 or an A320 is being chopped and combed. Okay. What else we introduced is in the Air Ops rules at AMC level, and that is also to somehow reduce or encourage aircraft operators to reduce the number of variations that they use, is an AMC that says if the aircraft operator has variations from the industry standard that they apply, and those variations are not related to safety, they should probably consider twice if they need those variations. If they are related to safety, they should consider twice, maybe do a safety risk assessment to actually identify whether they do need those variations or can they just drop them, in order to even further harmonize the operational procedures between the aircraft operator and the ground handling service provider. So we have introduced some hooks here and there in order to encourage the aircraft operators and the ground handling service providers to reach the same set of procedures.
So we have not only created regulations for ground handling organizations, but also updated the existing regulations for airlines, for air operators, to make sure that this is a level playing field and that everybody knows what is expected of them. And I think we can move to the next one.
I might add one more thing here to answer Hendrik's question, and that is probably a model that some of you are familiar with, some of you are not. It doesn't apply to any aerodrome, and that is the safety stack. Why I'm referring to the safety stack is because we have seen at least one aerodrome in Europe, even though it's not a member state, it's the UK, it's the aerodrome in Luton that has been the first aerodrome to apply the safety stack model developed by Eurocontrol with a group of experts in human factors. The safety stack model is applicable to certain specific aerodromes. Dublin Airport is another aerodrome where this model is being implemented. What the advantage of a safety stack model is the fact that all the aerodrome users, and here it's mainly the aircraft operators and the ground handling service providers under the coordination of the aerodrome operator, they all agree on using one single set of operational procedures for all the operations at that aerodrome, meaning ground handling activities. And this is a perfect reduction both of the amount of GSE of the equipment present at the apron during aircraft turnaround, and also a single set of operational procedures if the services are provided to the same type of aircraft. So again, this model may work at some aerodromes while it cannot be implemented at some other aerodromes, but that's another step towards harmonization of procedures.
So we have 12 minutes left. I'll take the next question. Antonio Bruno, as an airline related to supervision of activities, which activities fall under the new regulation? For example, station managers, tax ramp supervisors. Who would like to answer this question?
Yeah, I can try to answer, because the question is which activities fall under the new regulation, for example. Well, if I refer back to the flowchart that Tony has shown and explained a little bit, there are more or less five activities: passenger handling, baggage handling, with related articles in the regulation 2.2. There is no list of all the specific activities there. In AMC and GM, there will be more explanation about it, but it's not a complete list. It's not a full list. So it's like Adina said before. Also, it's not also here not black and white. It's not clear. Station manager, PAX, ramp supervisors. I think you just have to look at the articles and try to find an answer there, and wait a little bit longer for the AMC and guidance material. It can make some things more clear to you.
And discuss it with your competent authority that will assist you. So thank you. Then I propose we take one more question on that is highly voted. And then we also have 10 minutes left to look at the declaration questions, because that was one of the focus of our webinar today. Julie Paulson asked, to which level will it reduce each airline auditing compared with DAQCP? Maybe you will also explain what DAQCP means.
So the reason why we have spent a lot of time in creating the rules for cooperative oversight and for the oversight was precisely because we know how big the auditing burden is today to the ground handling organizations. And what we aim at and what this regulation will lead towards is a reduction in the number of audits performed by air operators. This will not happen overnight, and we will never be tired of repeating these things. So please don't expect a miracle overnight as soon as this regulation becomes applicable. But we expect a significant reduction of the air operators' audits because in the future, as Julia mentioned before, we will have a ground handling regulation, and the organizations providing ground handling services will be directly audited. They will have a competent authority for that. And the ultimate result of this oversight belongs to the ground handling organization. Nothing will prevent the ground handling organization from sharing the result of the audit done by the competent authority with its clients, which are the airlines, the aircraft operators, such that the aircraft operators can simply say, okay, so this has been verified by your competent authority. We don't need to double check that. We will take the result of your competent authority oversight into account, and then we can only focus on what's more important for us, the aircraft operator, for example, the SOPs, the operational procedures. We don't have to verify. So the aircraft operators will no longer have to verify every single detail that they are verifying today, meaning how the training is being done, whether all the training has been completed. This is now the responsibility of the competent authority to check.
But it's not forbidden. We can forbid
Of course, it's
the
not
airlines to still request or require the ISEGO
yes,
audits.
it's a possibility.
It's the possibility. We cannot say it's not.
And where I also see a very good combination between what the industry and what the aircraft operators are doing today and what the competent authorities will do in the future is those particular areas which not all the competent authorities will be able to verify every year, for example, and thank you, Julie, this is a good example of the anti-icing quality compliance pool. This is, I think this is the acronym. Yeah. So it's the pool of inspectors that perform the anti-icing audits to the aircraft, to the ground handling de-icers of the member airlines. Mm-hmm. So what I had in mind, what I meant to say was, not all the competent authorities will do a yearly check of the de-icing activities of ground handling service providers, but some authorities might want to do that, and they will probably do that. So in the Nordic countries, we expect that the competent authorities will do a yearly verification of the de-icing and anti-icing capabilities and performance operations of the ground handling service providers. But this is probably not going to happen every year in the rest of Europe where winters are not so harsh. So it's also something that we included in the rules at AMC levels, the possibility for the competent authorities to do a more frequent oversight at certain aerodromes where they are aware that there is a particular safety risk, mm-hmm. or due to the geographical conditions or the operational conditions. So while some competent authorities will have this capability and will want to do a yearly de-anti-icing audit, some will not and will say, okay, we have the DAQCP there. Why don't we have a look to see if this is sufficiently covered in terms of safety risk and safety performance of the de-anti-icing organizations at the other airports. So I think this is a very good example of where the two may combine or may complement each other.
Okay, that was good. And also to know that, of course, the ground handler may share this information of the oversight with the airline, but there was also a question whether the airline has direct access to the member states' oversight data, and this is not the case. Member states are not required to automatically provide access to airlines to the audits that they're doing on ground handling organizations. Now I propose that we go, because we only have 5 minutes left, to the questions that are more specific on the declaration. So whoever shares the screen, can you click on the word declaration that has 20 questions? Because there are quite some good questions there. So the first question with 15 votes is, could EASA clarify whether activities like arrival checks, walkarounds and headset communication performed by a maintenance organization after release and at the operator's request fall under the ground handling regulation, requiring a ground handling declaration? Do we have an answer? If we need more time, we can also provide the answer later.
We have an answer. Okay. And the answer is no. These are activities performed by a maintenance organization while the aircraft is still being checked for maintenance, for compliance with the maintenance requirements and with the airworthiness. Mm-hmm. So these are not proper ground handling activities, and it's not expected that a maintenance organization will have to comply with the ground handling regulation and submit a declaration.
So that's just
they are out of scope.
Good. Then the next one, for the declaration, how to decide to which authority to submit it. If the organization has management offices, CEO, so chief operating officer and chief financial officer and chief executive officer, and operates in different countries. Do we have an answer to this question?
So okay, I think that it's good that from time to time we go back to explaining to what competent authority you should, who is going to be your competent authority, who will do oversight on your activities. Because submission of a declaration is going to be simple, just as Paul explained. It's just going to be one click in one digital program, and then all the authorities will know. The reason why we introduced the principal place of business, to which all the other discussions are linked, for example, the management offices, is to streamline the cooperative oversight. So in the end, it will depend on you whether to determine if you have one single principal place of business or multiple places of business, because you have a CEO, a COO, and a CFO in every state where you provide services. In the end, the result of having one single principal place of business or more will be in how many times your competent authority will have to verify in the oversight process your management system over and over and over again, with probably the same results. So let me explain myself. If you are a global company, if you are a global ground handling service provider, and you apply the same management system everywhere in the member states, because we are interested in the EASA states, not what happens outside. If you know that all your stations in Europe apply the same management system, probably you will find it advantageous to have that management system verified only once by the competent authority, not 20 different times or 15 different times, as many countries there are in which you provide services. And if you apply the same management system, meaning the same training, the same SMS, the same operational procedures, the same maintenance program to your equipment, if you apply the same management system at all the aerodromes where you provide services, the advantage of having a cooperative oversight is that this management system is going to be checked only once, only by the competent authority where your principal place of business is. And then what will happen at each station is just to do a sample check of whether what you say you do, you actually do. So theory matches practice. So at every individual or at every station in the member states where you provide services, the competent authority can focus on actually how you operate at that station, how your turnaround process takes place, how safely the ground handling services are being provided, if all the training personnel is trained, or if all the ground handling personnel is trained in accordance with your manual, because that competent authority overseeing a station already has the results from the other competent authority that has verified your umbrella management system. They will not go through that again. They already rely on the results from the other competent authority and can focus on what's more relevant for that particular station. So in the end, it's going to be on you to decide whether you have one principal place of business or more, and to be able to demonstrate that that principal place of business has been determined following all the criteria in the rules.
So we are coming to the end of our webinar, and of course we had more than 100 questions. What we can try to do, at least the questions with the highest number of votes, we can provide answers, and we can also upload them on the event page of EASA. Yes. So you will also find the answers there. Yes. I cannot promise that for the 105 questions, because that's a lot of work for us, but we will try our best to really capture the ones where we think they have attracted a lot of attention from you, and where you also found that really helpful, that this question was important for you. Now I'm already seeing that participants are dropping out, because we have actually reached the end of this webinar. So we still have 490 participants. I think at the highest point we had some 700 or so.
700 plus, over 200
plus
on the YouTube. So yeah.
At some stage we had 666. So I was glad that we moved that number up a little bit. So yes, I would like to give the floor to any of you who would like to do a closing remark, because you have organized this webinar. And thanks, and from my side, thank the participants already for participating.
Yeah, it's great. It's great that we have so many of you online and also streamlining. We are looking forward to seeing you at the next webinar.
September.
And we will deliver as we promised. So you will get the AMCs and the GMs in a week, and we'll do our best to answer the questions that you asked that we didn't have time to answer during the webinar. And I also want to thank our speakers. Thank you very much, colleagues. And people online, just don't leave yet. You may be voluntold to join us for the next webinars, depending on the topic that we're going to choose. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.